Ambassador stood at the observation window of his diplomatic vessel and watched the human ship approach. He had been studying this species for 3 cycles now, reading their broadcasts, analyzing their culture, trying to understand what kind of beings had crawled out of that dangerous blue planet they called Earth. The Dominion had chosen him for this mission because his species was known for patience. They were careful. They did not rush into things, and right now was grateful for that training because something about the approaching ship made him deeply uncomfortable. It was not a warship. The humans had made that clear in their communications. It was a simple patrol vessel called the Reliant, carrying fewer than 50 crew members. By council standards, it was barely worth noticing. But he noticed very much. The docking procedure went smoothly, gathered his delegation of 6 diplomats and walked to the airlock. When the doors opened, he got his first look at a living human. Her name was Lisa Grant. She was the commander of the vessel, a woman of average height with short dark hair that was turning gray at the edges. She wore a simple uniform and carried no visible weapons. She smiled at and extended her hand. "Ambassador, welcome aboard the Reliant. I'm Commander Lisa Grant. We're honored to be your first contact with humanity." Had read about this custom. He reached out and took her hand, intending to perform the human greeting ritual they called a handshake. The moment their hands touched, felt something that made his secondary heart skip a beat. His species had the ability to sense biological signatures through physical contact. It was how they had survived on their own dangerous, by being able to detect predators before they struck. This ability had served them well for millions of years. Right now, it was telling something impossible. This ordinary woman, this simple patrol ship commander, had muscle density 3 times greater than the strongest warrior. Her bones were so thick and hard that they could withstand pressures that would turn his skeleton into paste. Her reflexes, even while she stood perfectly still and relaxed, operated at speeds his people reserved for their most elite soldiers. Completed the handshake and tried to keep his composure. He must be wrong. His senses must be malfunctioning. Perhaps humans emitted some kind of interference that confused biology. "You must be the captain of your special military forces," said through his translation device. Lisa Grant laughed. The sound was casual, almost careless, and it made feel worse. "Me no, sir. I'm just regular Navy. Been doing patrol routes for about 15 years now. Pretty quiet work mostly." Did not believe her. He could not believe her. What he had sensed was impossible for a non-warrior. "Perhaps you would give us a tour of your vessel," he asked, hopping to gather more information. "Of course, Ambassador, right this way." The tour began in what the humans called the mess hall. It was empty except for one crew member, a young man named Danny Park who was preparing food in the kitchen area. He nodded politely at the delegation and continued his work. "Danny here is our head cook," Lisa explained. "Best food in the sector. His noodle soup is famous." Watched Danny lift a large metal container and move it from one counter to another. The container was clearly heavy, but Danny handled it easily, as if it weighed nothing. "How much does that container weigh?" asked. Danny looked at it and shrugged. "This one, about 80 kilos, I think, maybe 90. 90 kilograms. The young cook was casually lifting 90 kilograms with one arm while having a conversation. A soldier at peak physical condition could lift perhaps 40 kilograms in the same manner. "Are you also military trained?" asked. Danny laughed the same casual laugh that Lisa had given. "Me? No, I'm just a cook. Did 2 years of culinary school back on Earth. Never been in a fight in my life." They moved on to the recreation area, which the humans called the gym. Here, saw something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. A human woman named Maria Santos was running on a machine. Her feet pounded against the moving surface at a speed that would be classified as full sprinting for most council species. Sweat covered her face and her breathing was heavy, but she did not stop. "How long has she been doing this?" asked. Lisa checked her watch. "Maria started about an hour ago. She usually does 90 minutes before her shift." An hour, 90 minutes of sprinting. No council species could sustain that level of activity for more than a few minutes without collapsing. "She is your soldier?" asked, already knowing what the answer would be. "Maria? No, she's our communications officer. Handles all our long-range signals and translations. She just likes to run." In another part of the gym, a large human male was lifting metal weights above his head. Senses told him that those weights exceeded the combined body mass of 4 soldiers. The human lifted them again and again, grunting with effort but showing no signs of stopping. "That's Big Tom," Lisa said. "He works in engineering, keeps our engines running smooth." An engineer, not a soldier. An engineer who could lift more weight than any had ever lifted in recorded history. The tour continued to the medical bay. Here, found a human named sitting on a bed, while a young doctor named Chris Lee examined his arm. "What happened?" Lisa asked. Looked embarrassed. "Basketball game got a little rough last night. I think I broke something." Chris Lee studied a screen showing images of his arm. "Yep, clean break of the radius. We'll get you in a cast and you'll be good as new in about 6 weeks." Stepped forward. "Did you say 6 weeks?" Chris looked at him with a friendly expression. "That's right, Ambassador. Standard healing time for a bone fracture. Maybe 8 weeks if there are complications, but's young and healthy. He'll be fine." 6 weeks to regenerate bone, without any technological assistance, without any medical intervention beyond a simple cast. With a similar injury would be disabled for life. Most council species would require months of intensive treatment and would never fully recover. "This is normal for your species?" asked. "Pretty normal, yeah. Humans are tough, we heal up quick." Looked at, who was already joking with Chris about getting back to basketball practice. He looked at Lisa, who was watching with a patient smile. He thought about Danny the cook and Maria the communications officer and Big Tom the engineer. These were not warriors, these were not special. By human standards, they were completely ordinary. Excused himself and returned to his own ship. He sat alone in his quarters for a long time, composing the message he would send to the Galactic Council. The message was simple, but its implications would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. These are not their warriors. These are their administrators, their cooks, their communicators. By every measure we possess, these ordinary humans exceed the physical capabilities of our most elite soldiers. They do not understand that they are exceptional. They believe themselves to be average. I have seen what their regular citizens can do, and I am filled with a fear I cannot fully express. I dare not imagine what their actual warriors might be capable of. Proceed with extreme caution. We may have discovered something far more dangerous than we anticipated. The council received the message within hours. They requested clarification. Surely the ambassador was mistaken. Surely his senses had been confused. He was not mistaken. His senses had not been confused. And somewhere on that little blue planet called Earth, millions of humans went about their ordinary lives, completely unaware that they had just terrified one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. The real warriors were still waiting to be discovered. 8 months had passed since first contact. Humanity had established basic diplomatic relations with 17 council species. Trade agreements were being written. Cultural exchanges were being planned. Everything seemed to be moving forward smoothly. Then came the incident at Station. Station was a trading post in the outer territories. It floated in space like a small metal moon, home to over 2,000 civilians from various species. They were merchants and miners and travelers, ordinary people going about ordinary lives. Among them were 43 humans who had come to negotiate mining rights in a nearby asteroid belt. The pirate clan had been watching station for months. They were a brutal species, tall and scaled, with claws that could tear through metal. For generations, they had raided the outer territories, taking what they wanted and killing anyone who resisted. They attacked at dawn station time, when most of the civilians were still sleeping. Their ships surrounded the station. Their warriors poured through the airlocks. Within an hour, they had control of everything. They gathered the hostages in the main trading hall and made their demands: 50 million credits and safe passage to neutral space. The Galactic Council received the news and began emergency negotiations. They had dealt with the before. They knew that paying the ransom was the safest option. Any rescue attempt would result in massive civilian casualties. But the humans did not want to negotiate. Captain Pete was the ranking human in the sector. He commanded a cargo vessel called the Sundown, and he had been hauling agricultural equipment between colonies for 22 years. He was not military. He had never been military. He was just a man who flew a ship and did his job. But 43 of his people were on that station. 43 humans who had trusted the galaxy to keep them safe. Pete was not willing to wait for negotiations. He sent a message to every human vessel and station within range. He explained the situation. He asked for volunteers. He made it clear that what he was planning was dangerous and probably stupid and might get them all killed. 11 humans answered his call. There was Grace, a retired schoolteacher from the colony on New Seattle. She was 67 years old and walked with a slight limp from an old injury. She had spent 30 years teaching children and had never held a weapon in her life. There were Tony and Bate, a married couple who ran a small shipping company. They had 3 children waiting for them back home. They came anyway. There was Jake Martinez, a college student who had been backpacking through the sector during his summer break. He was 21 years old and had planned to major in history. There was Ford, a nurse who had been working at a medical station 2 systems away. She had heard the call and had flown for 6 hours to join them. There were 6 others, men and women from different backgrounds, different professions, different lives. None of them had military training. None of them had ever been in real combat. None of them had any business trying to fight 200 pirates. They came anyway. Pete gathered them on the Sundown and looked at their faces. He saw fear there, but he also saw something else, something harder, something that the Council species would never understand. "We don't have weapons," he told them. "We don't have armor. We don't have training. What we have is each other and whatever we can find on this ship. They outnumber us 20 to 1. By any reasonable measure, we should stay here and let the Council handle this." He paused and looked at each of them. "But those are our people in there, and I'm not leaving them." They spent 4 hours preparing. They took mining equipment and turned it into weapons. They studied the station's layout from publicly available documents. They made a plan that was simple and desperate and relied entirely on surprise. At midnight station time, they moved. They had 200 armed soldiers spread throughout the station. They had secured every entrance and exit. They had hostages in the main hall and patrols in every corridor. They were confident. They were organized. They were ready for anything. They were not ready for 12 angry humans. Pete led the first team through an old maintenance hatch that they had not bothered to guard. Grace was right behind him, carrying a piece of metal pipe that she had sharpened on one end. The first patrol never saw them coming. Grace was 67 years old. She had spent her life teaching children, grading papers, attending parent conferences. She had never hurt anyone. But she had watched the news footage of the attack. She had seen the bodies of the civilians they had killed. She had heard the screaming of the hostages. Something old and cold woke up inside her, something that had been sleeping for a very long time. She moved through the corridor like a ghost. They were larger than her, stronger than her, better armed than her. It did not matter. She was faster than they expected. She was more vicious than they could imagine. She struck from angles they did not anticipate, and she did not stop until they were down. 23 fell to Grace that night, a retired school teacher with a metal pipe. The other teams were equally effective. Tony and Bate fought back to back, protecting each other with a coordination that came from 20 years of marriage. Jake Martinez, the history student, discovered that he had inherited his grandfather's talent for close combat. Ford, the nurse who had sworn to do no harm, harmed plenty of that night. The assault lasted 14 minutes. When Council security forces arrived, responding to the distress calls, they found a station littered with unconscious and dead. The hostages were free. The pirates were defeated. The 12 humans were standing in the main hall, catching their breath. Pete had a black eye and a torn shirt. Grace was sitting on a bench, examining a bruise on her forearm. Tony was hugging his wife while Jake Martinez stood nearby, looking stunned at what he had just done. The Council security commander, a name who had been following human activities since first contact, approached them with a mix of awe and horror. "How is this possible?" he asked. "You had no weapons, no training, no support. There were 200 of them." Pete looked at him with tired eyes. "They took our people," he said simply. "What did you expect us to do?" "But you are not soldiers. You are civilians." Grace looked up from her bench. Her gray hair was disheveled, and there was blood on her hands that was not her own. "I was a school teacher," she said. "Do you know what that means? It means I spent 30 years dealing with difficult children who thought they could push me around. These pirates were just bigger children with worse manners." Did not know what to say. He had watched his people's most elite warriors train for years to achieve a fraction of what these ordinary humans had just accomplished, and they did not even understand how remarkable they were. "We will need statements," he finally said. "The Council will want to understand what happened here." "Sure," Pete said, "but first I need to check on my people, the ones you were going to leave in there while you negotiated." There was an edge in his voice that made step back. The humans collected their injured, 3 total, a sprained ankle, a dislocated shoulder, and a cut that required stitches, and walked away. That night wrote another report. This one was longer than his first and much more frightening. "We have seen what human civilians can do when their people are threatened. They do not calculate odds. They do not assess risks. They simply act with a speed and brutality that defies explanation. I believe this is not a choice for them. I believe it is instinct, something built into their species over millions of years of survival on their death world. They are not warriors because they choose to be. They are warriors because they cannot be anything else. And if this is what their civilians can accomplish, I am more afraid than ever to discover what their actual military forces might do." The Council read the report and doubled their intelligence-gathering efforts on human military capabilities. They were right to be concerned. The civilians had just been the beginning. The first human special forces operator the Council ever encountered was a woman named. She arrived at Council Central as part of a security detail for the human ambassador. There were 12 guards in total, all of them assigned to protect the diplomatic mission. Was not the largest of the group. She was not the most outwardly impressive. She was of average height, with brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail, and she moved with a quiet calm that made her easy to overlook. Ambassador had made it his personal mission to study humanity. He had read every report, watched every recording, analyzed every piece of data he could find. He thought he understood what humans were capable of. He was wrong. The Concordants had been opposed to human integration from the beginning. They were an old species, proud and territorial, with a history that stretched back 50,000 years. They had been one of the founding members of the Council, and they did not appreciate these newcomers who had risen so quickly. Diplomatic protests had failed. Political maneuvering had failed. The humans continued to grow in influence and power, making allies where they made enemies. So they turned to other methods. They hired assassins from a dozen different species. They spent months planning, studying the security arrangements around the human ambassador, identifying weaknesses in the patrol routes. They assembled a team of 30 commandos, each one a veteran of 100 campaigns, each one an expert in the art of killing. They infiltrated Council Central on a quiet night when the stars seemed particularly cold. Their target was Ambassador William Carter, a former senator who had been appointed to represent humanity on the galactic stage. He was sleeping in his quarters, protected by the standard security measures and the 12 human guards who rotated shifts throughout the day. The commandos moved like shadows. They disabled the outer security systems without triggering any alarms. They eliminated the first line of defense, a pair of guards who never saw them coming. They made their way through the diplomatic quarter, getting closer and closer to their target. They encountered in a corridor outside the ambassador's quarters. She was alone. She was not wearing armor. She carried only a small sidearm at her hip. She looked at the 30 commandos and did not move. "Good evening," she said. "Can I help you?" The leader raised his weapon. "Stand aside, human. We have no quarrel with you, only with your ambassador." Tilted her head slightly as if considering the offer. Then she smiled. "I'm afraid I can't do that." What happened next was captured by the security cameras in the corridor. The footage was immediately classified at the highest level. Council military leaders who viewed it reported experiencing nightmares for weeks afterward. Moved. She did not fight like the civilians at station. There was no anger in her actions, no desperation, no wild energy. She moved like water flowing through rocks, like wind passing through leaves. Every motion was precise. Every strike was perfect. There was no wasted effort, no hesitation, no mercy. The first commando fell before he could fire his weapon. The second and third fell together, their bodies crumpling in ways that suggested their spines had been damaged. The fourth managed to get off a shot that hit in the shoulder, but she did not slow down. She did not even seem to notice. She flowed through them like a force of nature. She used their own weapons against them. She turned their numbers into a disadvantage, making them get in each other's way, making them hesitate for fear of hitting their own people. She found the weak points in their armor and exploited them with surgical precision. The engagement lasted 93 seconds. When it was over, all 30 commandos were dead or dying. Stood alone in a corridor filled with bodies, her shoulder bleeding where the shot had hit her, her breathing slightly elevated. She sat down with her back against the wall and applied pressure to her wound. When Council security forces arrived, responding to the silent alarms that had finally triggered, they found her sitting calmly outside the ambassador's door. "Is everything all right?" she asked them. "The ambassador is still asleep. I didn't want to wake him." Ambassador was among the responders. He looked at the carnage in the corridor and felt something close to religious terror. He had seen what human civilians could do. He had prepared himself for the possibility that human soldiers might be even more dangerous. He had not prepared himself for this. "What are you?" he whispered. Looked at him with calm eyes. "I'm just doing my job, Ambassador." The council demanded answers. They convened an emergency session and requested a briefing from the human military. They needed to understand what they had witnessed. They needed to know if there were more like her. Colonel Frank, the human military, agreed to provide limited information. "Is what we call a Tier 1 operator," he explained to the assembled council. "She's been training since she was 18 years old. Constant, intensive, specialized training for over 15 years. "What kind of training?" asked Grand Admiral of the fleet. Colonel smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. "I'm afraid that's classified. but I can tell you that is one of roughly 2,000 active Tier 1 operators in our military. We have other levels below that, other specializations. In total, our special operations community numbers around 70,000 personnel. The chamber fell silent. 70,000 warriors who could do what had done. 70,000 weapons of unimaginable destructive potential scattered across human space, waiting to be deployed. Grand Admiral had been paying attention since the incident at station. He had been running calculations, making projections, trying to understand the true scope of human military capability. Now he asked the question that had been haunting him for months. "Colonel, how large is your total military?" Frank considered the question. "Active duty, about 1.4 million. Add reserves and part-time forces, and you're looking at around 2.1 million. And that's just one of our nations. Globally, if you count all human military forces together, you're looking at approximately 20 million trained military personnel. 20 million soldiers, and represented the absolute peak of that pyramid. The finest warrior among 20 million warriors, the sharpest blade among an army of blades. The individuals said slowly, the Tier 1 operators, they are your best. They are among our best, yes. And the regular soldiers, the ones who are not special operators, what are they capable of?" Colonel looked at the Grand Admiral with something that might have been pity. "Admiral, with respect, you've already seen what our regular soldiers can do. You saw it at station. Those were civilians. Those were civilians who had never been in a fight in their lives. Our regular soldiers train every day. They run, they shoot, they practice combat tactics, they study warfare. An average human soldier is significantly more capable than those civilians you saw at." The implications settled over the chamber like a cold fog. The civilians had defeated 200 armed pirates with improvised weapons and no training. The regular soldiers were better than that. And the special operators, the people were better than the regular soldiers. "Why are you telling us this?" asked the observer, who had been listening in horrified silence. "Why reveal your capabilities?" Colonel turned to face him. His expression had not changed, but something in his eyes made the want to look away. "Because your people just tried to kill our ambassador, and I want you to understand something very clearly. Acted alone. She was not supported. She was not reinforced. She was a single operator dealing with an unexpected threat." He paused. "If your people try something like this again, we will not send one operator. We will send hundreds. And what happened in that corridor will happen across your entire civilization. Do you understand?" The observer understood. The council understood. And somewhere in the diplomatic quarter, Ambassador William Carter woke up from a peaceful sleep, completely unaware that a single woman had just saved his life and changed the political balance of the galaxy forever. Received treatment for her shoulder wound. It would heal in a few weeks. She returned to duty the next day. She was, after all, just doing her job. The hegemony had been conquering their corner of the galaxy for 3,000 years. They were large, powerful beings with armored skin and 4 arms that ended in razor-sharp claws. Their military was legendary. Their tactics were studied in war colleges across the galaxy. They had never lost a major conflict. They looked at humanity and saw weakness. The humans were new. The humans were small. The humans had technology that was still catching up to council standards. They believed that a show of force would put these newcomers in their place. It would remind the galaxy who the real powers were. They chose 7 as their target. 7 was a human mining colony on the edge of explored space. It had a population of 8,000 people, mostly miners and their families. It had no military presence beyond a small security force with basic weapons. It was, by any military measure, completely defenseless. They sent their war fleet, 40 vessels carrying 12,000 warriors, the pride of their military, the finest soldiers in the hegemony. They arrived at 7 and demanded immediate surrender. The colonists refused. The bombardment lasted 2 hours. When it was over, 3,000 humans were dead. The colony's infrastructure was destroyed. The survivors huddled in underground shelters, waiting for the end. The commander, a veteran named who had led 100 successful campaigns, sent a message to the human government. Your colony belongs to us now. Send tribute or watch more of your people die. The message reached Earth within hours. The response came even faster. The Galactic Council had observers embedded with the human government. They watched what happened next with growing horror. The humans did not panic. They did not debate. They did not call for negotiations or send diplomatic protests. The halls of power that had been filled with the usual noise of democracy fell silent, and in that silence something changed. Orders were given, ships were mobilized, personnel were selected. Within 72 hours, a human response fleet was assembled. It consisted of 12 vessels, not 40. These ships were not regular military vessels. They carried designations that meant nothing to the Council observers, combinations of letters and numbers that were apparently classified. Aboard those 12 ships were 600 humans. The Council observers requested more information. The human government provided a single statement: specialized assets have been deployed. The situation will be resolved. They did not know what was coming. Their scouts detected the 12 human ships approaching 7. Commander looked at the numbers and laughed. 12 ships against 40. 600 humans against 12,000 warriors. It was not even a battle. It was a joke. He ordered his fleet to form a defensive line around the colony. He wanted the humans to see their own people suffering below while he destroyed their pathetic rescue attempt. He wanted them to understand the futility of resistance. The human ships did not slow down. They accelerated. They hit the line like a hammer hitting glass. The Battle of 7 lasted 4 hours. 4 hours of chaos and fire and death. 4 hours that would be remembered across the galaxy for generations. The human ships were smaller and more maneuverable than the vessels. They wove through the enemy fleet, taking shots that would have destroyed normal ships, absorbing damage that should have been fatal. But the real horror was not the ships. The real horror was what came out of them. Human operators in combat suits launched themselves into space, crossing the void between vessels in seconds. They cut through hull plating with tools that should not have been able to pierce the armor. They entered the enemy ships and began to fight. They had never experienced anything like it. Their warriors were large, strong, heavily armed. They had been trained for years. They were confident in their abilities, but the humans who came for them were something else entirely. They moved through the corridors like ghosts. They killed without hesitation and without mercy. They used weapons and tactics they had never seen, exploiting weaknesses they did not know they had. They worked in perfect coordination, covering each other, supporting each other, advancing steadily through ship after ship. A soldier might kill one human, he might wound another, but there was always someone else coming, always another human appearing from the shadows with death in their hands. They did not stop. They did not retreat. They did not negotiate. Commander watched his fleet die around him. He watched his warriors, the pride of the hegemony, fall one by one. He tried to rally his forces, tried to coordinate a defense, but the humans were everywhere. They were inside his command ship now, working their way toward the bridge. He managed to transmit one final message to his before the end. They are not soldiers, they are something else. They do not stop, they do not hesitate, they feel nothing. We have awakened something terrible. When the battle ended, all 40 vessels had been destroyed or captured. 8,000 warriors were dead. The remaining 4,000 had surrendered unconditionally, many of them too injured to continue fighting. The humans had lost 19 personnel. 19. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The hegemony, which had been conquering species for 3,000 years, sent a formal request for peace negotiations within a week. The Council demanded answers. They needed to understand what had happened, how it was possible, what kind of beings could accomplish such a thing. General Sandra Price was assigned to conduct the briefing. She was a tall woman with gray hair and cold eyes, and she looked at the assembled council representatives without any particular emotion. "They attacked our people," she said. "They killed 3,000 of our civilians," we responded. "But the numbers," protested Admiral, 40 ships against 12, 12,000 warriors against 600. How is this possible?" They made assumptions about human military capability based on what they had observed of our civilian population. Those assumptions were incorrect. "What did we observe?" asked the representative, a diplomat who had been sent to negotiate the peace terms. "What did we misunderstand?" General Price turned to face him. "You saw our civilians defend themselves at station. You saw one of our Tier 1 operators neutralize an assassination team. You assumed that was the extent of our capabilities. Was it not?" "No." The general pulled up a display showing the battle statistics, casualty numbers, ship losses, time stamps for each phase of the engagement. "The personnel we deployed to 7 were drawn from 3 of our special operations groups. Combined, these groups represent approximately 4,000 active operators. We sent 600, about 15% of those units." The diplomat did his calculations quickly. 4,000, and they are all capable of what we witnessed at 7. They are trained to the same standards, yes. And your regular military, the soldiers who are not special operators. General Price almost smiled. "Our regular military numbers approximately 25 million personnel globally. The individuals you faced at 7 represent the top 0.1% of that number. Our average soldier is significantly less capable than a special operator, but they are also significantly more capable than anything you have ever faced." The diplomat sat in silence for a long moment. "Why did you not warn us? Why did you not show us your true strength?" "We did not want to frighten anyone. We came to the galaxy seeking friendship, not conquest. We showed you our merchants and diplomats because that is who we wanted to be. But you attacked our people. You killed our children. And so you learned what we really are." General Price turned off the display. "The hegemony has been conquering species for 3,000 years. In 3,000 years, no one has ever stopped you. It took us 4 hours. I hope this provides sufficient context for the peace negotiations." The negotiations were concluded within 3 days. The terms were favorable to humanity, but not unreasonably so. The humans did not want to destroy them. They simply wanted them to understand. The galaxy understood. On 7, the surviving colonists emerged from their shelters to find human soldiers standing guard over them. The soldiers looked tired but alert, their weapons ready, their eyes scanning for any remaining threats. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, walked up to one of the soldiers and looked at him with wide eyes. "Are you the heroes?" she asked, "the ones who saved us?" The soldier looked down at her. He had blood on his armor and exhaustion on his face, but he managed a small smile. "We're not heroes, kid. We're just soldiers. It's our job." The little girl considered this. "You're heroes to me," she said. The soldier did not have a response to that. Somewhere above them, the wreckage of 40 warships drifted silently through space, a reminder of what happened when someone threatened humanity's people. A reminder that the Council had been right to be afraid. 10 years had passed since humanity made first contact with the Galactic Council. 10 years of trade agreements and cultural exchanges and careful diplomacy. 10 years of watching and learning and being afraid. The Council convened an emergency session in the Great Chamber at the heart of their capital station. Representatives from every major species were present, along with observers from dozens of minor ones. The topic was simple: the human question. What were they going to do about humanity? In 10 years, the humans had not started a single war. They had not conquered any species. They had not seized any territory beyond what had been granted to them through legitimate treaties. They traded fairly. They honored their agreements. They were, by every measure, good galactic citizens. And they terrified everyone. Every council species had run the simulations. Every military analyst had studied the data. The computers had been fed every piece of information available about human military capability, human history, human psychology. The conclusions were always the same. In a prolonged conflict with humanity, the Council would lose. It was not even close. The humans were outnumbered. The humans had less advanced technology. The humans controlled fewer resources and had less strategic depth. By every conventional measure, the Council should have been able to crush them easily. But the simulations did not care about conventional measures. The simulations cared about facts, and the facts were terrifying. Human soldiers recovered from injuries that would kill other species. Human ships fought beyond the point where any reasonable commander would surrender. Human civilians, given no training and improvised weapons, could defeat professional warriors 10-1. Human special forces could accomplish missions that the computers classified as impossible. The simulations predicted that a war with humanity would cost the Council between 60 and 90% of its military forces. The most optimistic scenarios still showed the Council crippled for generations. The pessimistic scenarios showed extinction. And that assumed the humans did not escalate. Ambassador stood before the Council to present his final analysis. He had spent 10 years studying humanity. He had interviewed thousands of humans, read millions of pages of their history, watched countless hours of their entertainment. He understood them better than any non-human in the galaxy. It had not made him less afraid. "They are not like us," he began. "We fight to expand territory. We fight to secure resources. We fight because our biology compels us to compete. Humans fight for different reasons." He activated a display showing images from human history, their world wars, their revolutions, their genocides and crusades and endless, bloody struggles for dominance. For 200,000 years they have been killing each other, not for food, not for survival, not for any rational reason that we can understand. They kill each other over ideas, over beliefs, over insults that happened generations ago. The images continued: battlefields strewn with bodies, cities reduced to rubble, weapons of such destructive power that they could have wiped out their entire species. They invented ways to kill millions of people at once. They developed poisons that could end all life on their planet. They created weapons that split atoms and released the energy of stars, and they used them on each other, on their own kind. The chamber was silent. We have seen what their civilians can do when provoked. We have seen what their basic soldiers can accomplish. We have seen what their special forces are capable of. And I must tell you, honored council members, that we have not seen the worst of them, not even close. Paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the assembly. The humans we have encountered are the peaceful ones, the traders and diplomats and explorers. They are the humans who want to make friends and build relationships. But there are other humans, humans who have spent their entire lives studying war, humans who have mastered every form of violence their species has ever invented, humans who dream of nothing but conquest and glory. He displayed a final image, a human recruitment poster showing a young soldier in uniform. This is how they see their warriors, not as aberrations, not as exceptions, as the expression of what humanity is. Every human carries the potential for this inside them, every single one. The grandmother who teaches children, the cook who makes soup, the student who studies history. Given the right circumstances, any of them could become what we saw at 7. Turned off the display and faced the council directly. I have two recommendations. The first is that we attempt to destroy humanity now, while they are still young and relatively weak. Such a campaign would require the combined military forces of every council species. It would cost us dearly. It might cost us everything, but it might succeed. And your second recommendation, asked Grand Admiral, that we make them our friends, that we welcome them without reservation, that we integrate them so deeply into galactic civilization that they will never have reason to turn against us, that we become so valuable to them, so loved by them, that the thought of harming us would be unthinkable. The representative stood. His species had learned the hard way what happened when you threatened humans. You are suggesting we surrender without a fight. You are suggesting we accept these death world monsters into our civilization and hope they do not destroy us. I am suggesting we choose survival, replied. I am suggesting we recognize that some battles cannot be won through force. The humans are not our enemies. They do not want to conquer us. They want to trade with us. They want to learn from us. They want to be our partners. He looked around the chamber at the representatives of 100 species, all of them frightened, all of them uncertain. We have a choice. We can make enemies of the most dangerous species the galaxy has ever seen, or we can make friends with them. We can teach them our wisdom and share their strength. We can build something together that neither of us could build alone. The debate lasted 30 hours. Species that had never agreed on anything argued passionately for their positions. Some wanted war. Some wanted isolation. Some wanted to flee to distant corners of the galaxy and hope the humans never followed. In the end, the vote was unanimous. Humanity was granted full council membership with all rights and privileges. Special provisions were made for military cooperation. Cultural exchange programs were expanded dramatically. Trade agreements were without the usual decades of negotiation. The humans seemed confused by the sudden enthusiasm. Ambassador William Carter approached during the ratification ceremony. He was an older man now, his hair completely gray, but he still had the same friendly smile that remembered from their first meeting. I don't understand, Carter said. 6 months ago, half the council wanted to quarantine us. Now everyone wants to be our ally. What changed? Considered his response carefully. We realized something important, Ambassador. What's that? That it is far better to have humans as friends than as enemies. Your special forces showed us what a few hundred of your best could do. Your regular military showed us what your average soldiers are capable of. And we realized that we never want to find out what happens when you truly commit to a war. Carter frowned slightly. We're not that scary, are we? Behind him stood silently, watching the room with those calm, assessing eyes that had become famous throughout council space. Looked at her, remembered the surveillance footage from that night in the corridor, and suppressed a shudder. Respectfully, Ambassador, you have no idea. Carter seemed to consider this. Then he smiled and extended his hand. Well, Ambassador, I hope we can prove that friendship with humans is worth the risk. We're not the monsters you think we are. Took the human's hand and felt that same impossible strength, that same terrifying potential, wrapped in warm flesh and friendly intentions. I believe you, Ambassador, but I am grateful that we will never have to test that belief. The ceremony concluded. The treaties were signed. Humanity took its place among the stars, welcomed by a galaxy that had seen their potential and decided that friendship was the only sane option. The Galactic Council had dreaded human regulars. They had been right to. But they had also been smart enough to choose peace. And somewhere on Earth, billions of humans went about their ordinary lives, raising children, cooking meals, teaching classes, completely unaware that the galaxy had looked upon them and decided that these ordinary people were too dangerous to fight. The special forces were legendary. The regular soldiers were terrifying. But it was the ordinary humans, the civilians with no training and no weapons, who had truly convinced the Council. Because if those were the regular ones, the Council did not want to imagine what the special ones could really do. Some questions, they decided, were better left unanswered.